Today's lesson is called Can't Travel Abroad? Why not opt for a staycation instead? Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff.
My name is Roger, and here we are stuck in Taiwan, working, making money, making a living, and stuff like that. But if you've got some vacation time or some holiday time, you might consider going abroad. But, you know, it's kind of difficult to do that now because we've got the virus still kind of floating around out there somewhere, and a lot of people have to stay put in Taiwan. So, yeah, how do you have fun but not go overseas?
Maybe you stay put. How about that for an option? Yeah, a staycation. That means you stay put and you go on vacation at the same time, which I guess sounds a little bit strange, but also it's kind of a funny word, a staycation. Yeah, we don't need to go anywhere fancy. We don't need to go abroad to have a vacation. We can just have a staycation. Anyways, we can't travel abroad, so we're going to figure out how to have a staycation. That's what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of days. So stay put, everyone. Let's take a short break. But when we come back, we will discuss the first part of our article.
Can't travel abroad? Why not opt for a staycation instead? The COVID-19 pandemic has affected us in many ways, not the least of which is the way we spend our holidays. With long quarantine periods and bans on overseas travel, people have had little choice but to go on staycations, staying at or close to their homes for vacation. As a trend, the staycation isn't new. It grew out of the financial crisis of 2008, which left many unable to afford vacations abroad, opting for holidays at home instead. But in 2020, the rise in demand for staycations turned out to be a blessing for local economies that suffered deep losses because of COVID-19.
大家好，标题中我们看到动词 opt 指选择，做出抉择，之后接 for 加名词或 to 加动词，像是 You can opt for a nicer room at the hotel if you are willing to spend the extra money. 如果你愿意付更多的钱，就可以选择更好的饭店房间。或是 Margot opted to have fish rather than steak for her meal. Margot 餐点选择了鱼，而不是牛排。另外，补充两个相关片语。第一 opt out of something 表示退出方案、活动、团体等，免除某责任。例如 In many countries, young men are not allowed to opt out of military service. 在许多国家，年轻男性必须要服兵役。第二 opt in or into 表示选择加入。举例来说 Employees may opt into the retirement account. 员工可以选择加入开设退休账户。再来，我们看到片语 not the least of which 表示其中一个颇为重要的……像是 The deal was important for several reasons, not the least of which was the trade agreement that it settled. 这项协议很重要，有几个原因，其中一个颇为重要的便是所制定的贸易协定。另外，补充几个包含 least 的片语。第一 The least of somebody's worries 表示某人最不需要担心的事。举例来说 Finding good restaurants is the least of your worries in a large city. 你根本不用担心在这座大城市找不到好餐厅。第二 Not in the least bit 表示一点也不，其中的 in 可以省略。例如 The first movie was not the least bit interesting, so I will not be watching the sequel. 第一部电影一点也不有趣，所以我不会去看续集。接着我们看到片语 have little choice but to 加动词，表示除了……之外几乎没有选择。例如 Ian had little choice but to skip the breakfast as he had been late for school. Ian 除了放弃吃早餐之外几乎没有选择，因为他上学已经迟到了。另外补充一个相关片语 leave somebody with no choice 表示让某人除了……之外别无选择。我们可以说After losing his job, the man was left with no choice but to get unemployment payments from the government. 那名男子失去工作后，他除了向政府领取失业救济金外，别无选择。 再来，我们看到名词 blessing 指幸事、好事、福祉，像是 You should consider it a blessing to have a place to live. 你应该为自己有地方住感到庆幸，或是 My parents offered me their blessings when I got married. 我结婚时，我的父母为我祝福。另外，补充一个相关片语 count one's blessings 表示知足。我们可以说 You should count your blessings that you didn't get hurt in the car accident. 你应该对你在车祸中没有受伤感到知足。
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Let's get into our article for today. We're asking this question, can't travel abroad, or you can't travel abroad? You can't go overseas for a vacation? Well, let's make a suggestion here. Why not? Okay, that's when you make a suggestion. Gee, I don't know what we should have for dinner tonight. Well, why not try some Italian food? There's a new Italian restaurant just down the street. Why not try that? So here, why not opt for a staycation? Opt here is being used as a verb. Why not choose a staycation? Why not select this as your choice here? Have a staycation instead of going abroad. So yeah, the phrase is opt for.
Choose, that would be the verb. Choice, that would be the noun. Opt is the verb. Option would be the noun. Okay, it's just something that you can do. One of many options that you have or choices that you have. So if you opt for something, you say, hey, I'm going to do that thing instead of something else. Anyways, let's start reading. The first sentence of our lesson says, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected us in many ways, not the least of which is the way we spend our holidays. Yes, apparently Thanksgiving was difficult for some families there, or at least in some situations it was quite different. I heard that there were many Zoom Thanksgiving dinners and stuff like that, and Zoom Christmases and things like that. So because of COVID-19, people did have to spend their holidays in new and different ways, and all of this is due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think we all know what a pandemic is now. A pandemic is a situation where a disease gets out of hand and it affects a very, very large area, maybe an entire country or the entire world.
Indeed. So yes, COVID-19 has affected us in many ways. And then we've got this phrase, not the least of which, okay, which basically means it's not the worst thing about the pandemic, but it almost is, okay? So yeah, not the least of which. I could say, for example, my friend Joe has many personal problems, not the least of which his tendency to insult people in public. That's a big problem. He's got other problems that are worse than that, but that is one of his worst problems there. His tendency to call people names in public and embarrass them and stuff like that. So yes, indeed, we've been affected by COVID-19 in many ways. And yes, this isn't the worst thing about how we spend our holidays, but it certainly is bad.
Anyways, the next sentence says, with long quarantine periods and bans on overseas travel, people have had little choice but to go on staycations, staying at or close to their homes for vacation. Yes, last year my family and I, we planned to go to the United States in the summer, but because of COVID-19, of course, we had to cancel our travel plans. Instead, though, we had a staycation of sorts. We instead kind of took a staycation here in Taiwan. We went to Penghu, so we were still in Taiwan. We stayed in Taiwan, but we still had a vacation, and we had a really good time on that vacation, so it was kind of a success. But yes, we weren't allowed to travel overseas. We weren't allowed to travel to the United States because there was a ban on overseas travel. Yes, if there is a ban on something, that thing is not allowed. That thing is forbidden.
I believe it was still possible to travel during that time, but you had to have a long quarantine period. When you returned to Taiwan, of course, you had to isolate yourself for 2 weeks. That's a quarantine. And yes, in some cases, overseas travel was just banned. You cannot go. We're not going to let you go. If you go, we will not let you come back. Maybe 5-10 years later, you can come back, but not right away. So because people are kind of stuck here in Taiwan, they could not go and have their usual holidays in Hong Kong or Japan or the United States or Europe or whatever. So they had little choice but to go on staycations. And that's our main topic for today, a staycation. And what that is, a vacation you have when you stay close to home, either inside your house itself or in the immediate area.
COVID-19 has restricted us in this particular way. Now, as a trend, the staycation isn't new. It grew out of the financial crisis of 2008, which left many unable to afford vacations abroad, opting for holidays at home instead. So there you go. It's a relatively new term. It came or grew out of the financial crisis of 2008. Okay, so during the financial crisis of 2008, a lot of people lost jobs, a lot of people lost their savings. There wasn't a whole lot of money around, so people couldn't afford to take vacations abroad. So instead, they stayed at home during the holidays, and they started calling this practice taking a staycation.
That's right. Financial here just means having to do with large sums of money. And of course, this crisis took place in 2008 and lasted for quite some time. But in 2020, about 12 years later, the rise in demand for staycations turned out to be a blessing for local economies that suffered deep losses because of COVID-19. So here we've got the word blessing, which is something good that happens to you. If you're religious, of course, you're thankful for the blessings of God, all the things that God gives you, which you believe if you're Christian. And so here we can say this is a blessing in disguise for the local economy because people stay here and they travel here. And hotels and restaurants have a boom in their business.
There you go. What a blessing. All right, folks, with that, it's time for us to take a short break, but don't go away. We'll be back right after this.
In Taiwan, for instance, city folks headed to the mountains, beaches, and surrounding islands over the summer, rediscovering beauty in their own backyards and reviving local businesses at the same time. High-end hotels, initially left out of the staycation boom, began attracting guests with discounted packages and themed stays, such as yoga retreats, complete with access to their luxury facilities.
第二部分我们看到单字 retreat 这个字是名词，指进修之旅、僻静处、退隐处，像是 When life gets too busy for Hector, he goes to his mountain retreat for a few days. 当 Hector 生活变得太忙时，他就会到他的山中隐居处住几天。
Okay, staycations were happening all over the world, but let's focus on Taiwan as an example. So in Taiwan, for instance, or for example, city folks headed to the mountains, beaches, and surrounding islands over the summer, rediscovering beauty in their own backyards and reviving local businesses at the same time. So yes, there are lots of things that we can check out here in Taiwan and around Taiwan. You can go to the mountains, you know, the Central Mountain Range. You can go to Sito or the Cross Island Highways or whatever. And of course, there are beaches in Kending and Fulong. And of course, you could also go to the surrounding islands, which of course would be Penghu, as Jeff talked about earlier, but it could also include Lanyu and Green Island, and maybe there are some other ones like Xiaoliuqiu or whatever.
There you go. Or Jinmen, that's a great place to take a staycation here in Taiwan. Anyways, high-end hotels, initially left out of the staycation boom, began attracting guests with discounted packages and themed stays, such as yoga retreats complete with access to their luxury facilities. Yes, when we went to Penghu, we were able to stay at quite a nice hotel, and it didn't cost all that much. We had quite a nice package deal. Anyways, high-end hotels, it says, were initially left out of the staycation boom. By the way, initially means at first or in the beginning. And then here, a boom is a period of economic thriving. If there's a boom in a certain area of the economy, there's a lot of economic activity there and a lot of money is being made in that particular sector.
That's right. So I'll give you an example sentence with initially here. I initially was going to ride my bicycle to work today, but because of the rain, I took the bus. And yes, there has been a staycation boom in Taiwan and in various places around the world. And yeah, these guests were attracted to these big resorts and these big hotels with those discount packages and themed stays. I guess with themes, maybe some cartoon characters or something like that. Also, these yoga retreats. If you're into yoga, you could go to a retreat, which is probably when you stay someplace for 2 or 3 days, and maybe you're there with some other people, and you get to meet new people, and you get to practice yoga together. And, of course, these hotels were complete with access to their luxury facilities, like the spa and the swimming pool, the exercise room, and stuff like that.
Okay, folks, with that, it's time for us to take another break, but don't go away. We'll be back after this.
Businesses have adapted in other ways, too, to observe the new normal. One tour company in India began organizing private staycations that promised social distancing, and a resort there also created workation packages that provided office facilities so guests could work remotely while enjoying their holiday setting.
最后第三部分，我们看到名词 resort， 意思是度假胜地，像是 If we stay at a resort during our vacation, it should be very relaxing. 如果我们能在度假胜地度过假期，应该会令人非常放松。
Okay, so we were just talking about hotels and restaurants and stuff like that, and how they benefited from the staycation boom. But businesses have adapted in other ways too, okay? Just regular businesses, companies. They've adapted to observe the new normal. So here, to observe just means to recognize it and deal with it. And of course, this is the new normal. Normal here is actually being used as a noun, but it refers to the normal situation because of the pandemic. And even if the pandemic clears up, people are still probably going to be very cautious about traveling overseas.
Now, one tour company, it says, in India began organizing private staycations that promised social distancing. So, in Taiwan, we didn't really have much of a problem with COVID-19. So social distancing, we observed it, but it wasn't a huge deal. But if you leave Taiwan and go to a place like India and you want to have a staycation, well, that might be tricky, okay? If you want to do something like travel, even a short distance, you're going to have to be careful. That pandemic is out there, so there were some businesses that adapted to make sure that people could still take staycations. So there was this tour company in India. It organized private staycations that promised social distancing. And a resort there also created workation packages that provided office facilities so guests could work remotely while enjoying their holiday setting. Well, that sounds like these businesses definitely were adapting to the situation, to the new normal.
Yep, it was a resort there, which is kind of like a hotel, but they have other facilities as well, like a swimming pool, a spa, maybe a beach, and stuff like that. A resort is basically a place you can stay in and never really leave during your vacation because there are so many things to do. Interesting. They've made this new word here, workation. Yeah, you can have fun and work at the same time. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。课文第一部分写到，宅度假 staycation 是源自于2008年的金融危机。那金融危机让许多无法负担出国度假的人反而选择在国内度假。好，文中用到 left many unable to afford vacations abroad 是表达说让许多人无法负担出国度假。好，那它这边用的动词 leave 是表达使什么处于某种状态。那当我们用句型 leave 加受词加受词补语，就可以表达任由某人或某事物处于什么样的状态中。这个受词补语呢，可以用形容词、过去分词、现在分词、介系词片语，像 leave somebody with no choice 使某人别无选择，那它就是用这种介系词片语 with no choice 来当它的受词补语用了。好，假设我们是要用分词来当受词补语，那么现在分词就是去表达受词的主动状态，过去分词就是表达受词的被动状态。我们来造两个例句。 I'll leave the front door unlocked我不会把前门锁上的。那这时候这个受词补语我们用 unlocked 没有锁上这个过去分词来去补充说明前门没有锁上的状态。好，再来看个例句。 The boat ride left her feeling nauseous搭那趟船让他觉得很不舒服，很想吐。那这边我们是用 feeling 这个现在分词来当受词补语用。好，课文下一句提到说，在2020年，国内经济因为新冠肺炎而饱受重大损失。那么宅度假的需求增加，结果变成了一大福音。句子里面用到 turn out 来表达结果是怎么样，最后变成怎么样。那这是用来带出事情的发展或是最终的后果。那我们以下介绍几种常见的句型。第一个，你可以用 turn out to be 加上名词或形容词，这边的 to be 可以省略。例如 The trip turned out to be a nightmare 也可以说 The trip turned out a nightmare 结果那趟旅行变成一场噩梦。好，再看第二个句型是你可以用 It turns out 加 that 子句。例如 It turns out that Ron was not the person who stole the money 结果发现Ron 并不是偷钱的那个人。第三个句型你可以用 As it turns out 逗号主词加动词。那这个句型是用来说明某事的后续发展，去表达说结果跟想象或预期的不同。例如 As it turns out The missing puzzle piece was under my pillow 结果发现那一片不见的拼图就在我的枕头下面。好，那我们另外补充一下，片语 turn out 它也有现身出席的意思，后面可以接 for 加活动，或者是接不定词。例如 Hundreds of people turned out for the event 有上百个人参加那场活动。再造个例句 More than 14 million people turned out to vote 有超过1400万人去投票。好，那么以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Ban. The politician favored a ban on all pork imports from that country. Financial. If you don't save some of your earnings each month, you could have financial problems in the future. Blessing. Owning a pet can be a real blessing for people in their old age. Initially. I was initially very angry, but I have begun to calm down now. Boom. After creating a popular travel advertisement, the city experienced a boom in tourism. Retreat. For her vacation last year, Susie chose to go on a retreat in the mountains. Resort. To surprise her husband, Tiffany booked a room at a 5-star resort.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you guys enjoyed reading and learning along with us. I am Jeff.
I am Roger.
See you next time.